Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another video, and really appreciate you guys for being here with me. And more importantly, I'm over here enjoying a nice day outside. Of course, it's very, very beautiful here, but that's not why you're here. You guys are here because, of course, this is part 3 of a 3-part series, and especially we are learning how to create our own custom bootable USB so that way you can automatically install RHEL. Now, if this is your first time on the video and you haven't seen the other 2 parts, I'll put links in the description or possibly on the screen as well. But you want to make sure that you follow the steps in part 1 and in part 2 because those videos set up what we're going to do in this video. And as promised, this video will take you to the promised land where it's going to take a culmination of all the things that we've learned and some new things that we're going to touch on today, and then apply it so that way you can do that automatic RHEL install that I teased you guys with back in part 1. So there's going to be a lot of stuff to cover, so I'll keep this intro very short and sweet. But as always, guys, I love you. I appreciate you. Make sure you go ahead and give me a like for the video as it helps the channel grow. Also as well, there's a lot of work that goes into making these videos for you guys, so a like would be really appreciated. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications so that way you're notified whenever I upload new videos to the channel. And of course, share this with a family member or friend. And without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and let's head over to the desktop so that way I can take you guys to the promised land and show you the rest of what you need in order to create that custom bootable ISO. And we're going to burn that ISO to a USB, and then we'll use that USB in order to automatically install and deploy RHEL. Welcome to the desktop, and this is where you should be after you install RHEL 8.10 using that USB media that we talked about earlier. Now, in order to go on to the next step, and there's a couple of things that we're going to do here, and this is where we're going to actually create our own custom installation media, so that way you can do that automatic install that we talked about. But there's a couple of steps in order to get us to the promised land. But if you follow closely, you should have your own custom installation media that will allow you to do automatic RHEL installs. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to install the Fedora Media Write tool. And one of the reasons why we're going to be utilizing that tool is because I'm trying to simplify the process for you to make sure that it is very easy for everyone to follow. So keep in mind, in order to install packages, you need to make sure, especially from a RHEL perspective, that the machine is registered. So that way you have access to repositories. Now, assuming that you've been following the series, if you have a developer account, this obviously should be very easy. So first things first, let's go ahead and go under activities and let's bring up our terminal. Now the first package that we're gonna install is called the Flatpak package. Try to say that 3 times fast. Flatpak package, Flatpak package, Flatpak package. Anyways, Flatpak package. So I'm going to copy and paste the command in here, and of course it's a very long command, so in order to make things easy for you, I'll go ahead and put that in the description as well. And as you can see, the command is the Flatpak remote add command, and it says if it doesn't exist, go ahead and add this URL. Now because I'm not utilizing RHEL 9, I have to use this command in order to install Flatpak. There's other ways to do it if you have a newer version of RHEL. Now of course it's asking me for authentication. Now I'm going to put in my password for authentication, but I don't think that I have this user, which is Luis Acosta, as a sudoer. So this actually may fail, and if it does, we'll have to switch to root. So that seemed to work. Now going forward, all of the commands actually will be done by root. And now that I think about it, for demonstration purposes, I should have switched to root earlier. But we also have to be very careful because root is typically not a user that we would want to use. We always want to make sure that we give super user permissions to the people that actually need it, instead of just giving out root passwords. But for demonstration purposes, let's go ahead and switch to root. So now the next command, after doing the Flatpak remote add, we can go ahead and paste a new command in here. And this one is the Flatpak install command. And if you're following the command, we're installing the Fedora Media Write tool. Again, in order to make sure that I make this easy for you, I'll put the command in the description as well. And as you can see, it's going ahead and pulling the packages from the web, and it's installing Fedora Media Write tool. So it looks like the installation is complete. And let's go ahead and test out the Fedora Media Write tool just to make sure. So let's head over to activities. Let's open up the applications. And as we can see here, Fedora Media Write Tool. And that seems to work okay. So looks like we are all done getting the first tool, which is the Fedora Media Writer. So let's close out of here. Now the next thing that we need to do is to launch Firefox. And the reason why we're going to launch Firefox is because we actually have to download our RHEL 8.10 ISO onto this machine. Remember, this is a brand new installation of RHEL 8.10, and we're going to need that RHEL 8.10 ISO in order to create our custom installation media. So let's head over to access.redhat.com. So let's head over to downloads. We want to pick on Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and let's go ahead and sign in. After you have signed in, we want to scroll down to where we see offline install images. So here is our offline install images. And of course, I want to get the latest version of RHEL, which of course at the time of this recording is 8.10. So let's click download on the RHEL 8.10 binary DVD. And now we just sit here and wait in order to be able to download the RHEL ISO. Now, if you're seeing here, it's 13.3 gigabytes in size, so it's going to take quite some time depending on your internet connection. I'm just very fortunate enough to have fiber in my home, so it will take me just a couple of minutes to finish the download process. All right, so it looks like our RHEL 8.10 DVD ISO is all done. Now, it is important to make sure that you know exactly where that ISO file went. And when I launched Firefox, of course, it was under Luis Acosta, which is the username that I was using. So if you notice, it went into the downloads directory. But given that I am root, I would have to go find that ISO under the /home/Luis Acosta, and then under the downloads directory. And in the downloads directory, if I were to do an ls here, you can go ahead and see that there is my RHEL 8.10 ISO. After we've located where our ISO went, the next step is to go ahead and mount the ISO so that way you can see the files inside of it. And for those who are not familiar, mounting is just a way of essentially taking a disk, putting it in the disk drive, and being able to read that disk. And that's an analogy that we used to do back in the old days when CD-ROMs or CDs were a thing. Nowadays, not a lot of people use that, nor do computers really have CD-ROM drives. So let's go ahead and use the mount command, -o, loop, and then this is where you use the path where the ISO is. So again, that's in my case, home, Luis Acosta, downloads, and then RHEL 8.10 DVD ISO. And I want to go ahead and mount that to the /mount directory. So if I were to do an ls on the mount directory, you can clearly see the files that are inside of that RHEL ISO. Now we're ready to go ahead and create our custom installation media. Now the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a temporary directory so that way I can extract all the files that are in this RHEL DVD that I've mounted. Let's create a directory, and we're going to create it under the temp directory. And let's call this RHEL 8.10. Next, let's go ahead and extract all the data that is in that mounted DVD, and let's put it into this temp directory. In order to extract the data, let's go ahead and use the tar command. Now for your convenience, I'll go ahead and put this specific tar command in the description. Now, if you're not familiar with the tar command, and especially all the options that it has, for now, just go ahead and copy and paste this command and know that it will do its magic. But in the future, we can break down this command to see exactly what it's doing. But the biggest thing to note here, and you want to make sure you get this correct, you want to go ahead and put the path that you just created for that temporary RHEL directory. And remember, in the previous step, we called it RHEL 8.10. So let's do a space here, and let's do /temp/RHEL 8.10. And let's hit enter on that. Now, if we list the files, and especially the hidden files that are under that RHEL 8.10 directory, so let's do an ls-la temp RHEL 8.10, you can actually see all the files that were in that mounted DVD. And even important to note, that hidden file such as .tree info, all of that stuff is very, very important. So you want to make sure that you have all the files and directories that were in that mounted RHEL ISO. Now we're actually going to manipulate this a little bit so that way we can have that automatic RHEL installation. In order to automatically install RHEL,
there's something that you have to embed, and it's called a Kickstart file. Now, a Kickstart file is nothing more than a file that tells the program how to automatically install RHEL. When you guys went through that section earlier where you were clicking through that GUI that told RHEL what to do with the partitions, what particular software to install, what particular keyboard language, or what your time zone is, all of that manual stuff that you were clicking through, a Kickstart file allows you to save those settings in there and bypass that whole process, because it will tell the program what to put so you don't have to start clicking those things, thus automating that whole entire process. Earlier, when I had you guys install RHEL 8.10 on your machine, and in my particular case, I was using the Lenovo. Your particular case, you can use any machine, of course, or you can do this in a virtual machine. But when I had you install that RHEL 8.10, it wasn't for nothing. Number one, we're utilizing it right now. But also, too, what you may not know is when you go through that process to install RHEL, that Kickstart file is actually located in the root directory. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. So if we were to do cd/root, let's do an ls here. You can see here that there's two files. There's an anaconda.ks.cfg, and then there's initial setup ks.cfg. And the one that I'm very interested in is the anaconda-ks.cfg. Now, if we take a look at what's inside of it, this file is actually a representation of what we clicked on when we went through that installation process. And this is a good basic foundation of the file that we're going to embed in our RHEL temporary directory. Now, we're going to have to make some adjustments to it, but it's a good baseline in order to get you to the next step, which is your own customized Kickstart file. And if you haven't figured it out by now, this will be your Kickstart file that you have to embed in your RHEL 8.10 temporary directory so we can create our own custom RHEL installation. All right, so let's go ahead and close out of this. I just wanted you guys to see exactly where it's located. Not only where is it located, but also as well, I wanted you guys to see what I'm leveraging in order to create that custom Kickstart file. So let's go ahead and quit out of here. I have already made my own custom Kickstart file, so let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. So if I were to use the less command in order to take a look at that Kickstart file, it's going to be located under my home, Luis Acosta, ks.config. Now this is the location where I decided to save it. So let's just take a quick peek at what's inside. Now let me see if I can make this smaller so it can fit all in one screen. So I've adjusted the window and made the text a little bit smaller because I wanted you guys to be able to see the whole entire Kickstart file. Now go ahead and pause the video and copy what you see here, so that way you can go ahead and do a custom installation as well. Now in a future video, I'll go ahead and break down what each one of these lines mean in the Kickstart file. But for now, I'll just keep this up so you guys can copy majority of what's on here. There is one thing that I'm gonna go over with you guys right now, and that's of course the system root password. And if you guys copy this entire Kickstart file, I at least want you to be able to log into the system. So let me show you exactly how that works. So let's quit out of this and let's go ahead and use VI in order to make some adjustments. So as you can see in line number 16, this is where you set the system's root password. And if you're wondering what this entire string is right here, this is actually the system's root password, but it is encrypted. So even if I share this file with you guys, nobody will know what this actually means. So let's go ahead and open up another terminal. So in order to make sure that you guys are able to log into your system if you use this Kickstart file, I'm going to show you how to create your own password, and you can replace what you see on line 16 with your own. So the most important part is you definitely want to keep the root pw space -- is crypted. That part you want to keep. The part that you want to change is the big string that you see towards the end of that. And you can use the command called openSSL in order to create your own hashed password. So if we go ahead and use the open SSL password -6, and of course we use the -6 because the -6 is a SHA-512 hash password. And let's go ahead and open parentheses and let's type in Acosta E.T.F for a password, and let's go ahead and close parentheses. And by the way, subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed. So after we go ahead and type in Acosta ETF, hit enter, you can go ahead and see that it generated our password. So now from this point, all we have to do is go ahead and copy the entire password. All right, so now that we've copied the password, let's go ahead and we can go in our file here and we can go ahead and delete, and let's go ahead and paste. And now you can see here, it matches. So when we go ahead and automatically deploy, Acosta ETF is going to be my password in order to log in as root. So let's go ahead and escape from here, right and quit. And just like that, you guys adjusted the root password in that Kickstarter file. Now here's a very important step, and you guys have to make sure you do this part. The Kickstarter file that you're going to be making changes on and you're going to embed in your custom RHEL installation media, you have to make sure that it's named ks.cfg. And the next step is to go ahead and take note of the Linux boot entry of the RHEL ISO. So if this is your first time doing this, and that may sound a little odd, what does that even mean? We can go into details later on, but go ahead and follow me here to a T, and let's make sure that we go ahead and grab those Linux boot entries. So we want to make sure that we use the grep command for this. So the command here is grep-a4, and we're going to open quotes. After we open the quotes, we're going to use the caret symbol followed by label space Linux, and then we're going to close that. Now let's go ahead and point that to our temporary RHEL 810 directory. So I'm going to use /temp/RHEL 810 /ISO Linux /ISO Linux.cfg. Now keep in mind, the output here is very important. So let's make sure that we know this particular label. Now let's use another terminal, because we're gonna have to take this label here and we're gonna have to copy and paste that, because we're gonna create a new boot entry in our ISO Linux config. Now keep in mind that we are adjusting the ISO Linux config file that is in that RHEL 810 temporary directory, because remember, we're creating a custom installation media. So right now we are making changes to those files. We're gonna repackage everything up, and then we're gonna go ahead and put that on the USB. Let's go ahead and in this terminal, let's change to root, because we wanna make sure that we don't have any issues when we're adjusting the file. Let's go ahead and clear our screen. Now let's use VI, and let's go to our temp directory, RHEL 810, ISO Linux.cfg. Now I want to go ahead and look for label. So here is our first label. So we are going to go ahead and input a line just above this. Now if you saw, it said that it is a write-only file, but of course, because I am root, I can go ahead and write even though it tells me it's a read-only file, and we're gonna force it, and I'll show you how to do that. So let's go ahead and copy our previous output here, copy, and let's go to our other terminal, and let's go ahead and paste. And let's add another line here. So now that we pasted this new boot entry into the ISO Linux config file, we're gonna have to make some adjustments here. So let's go ahead and make the adjustments and follow me carefully here. So let's go to line 61. So now that we're on line 61, we wanna replace where it says label Linux and replace Linux with Kickstart. Now in line 62, let's go and add menu label caret, and let's put a Kickstart space install RHEL 8.10. Now there's another change that we have to make, and it's on line 64, and where it says append, that's at least where it starts. We want to go to the end of the line where it says quiet, and from here we're going to type in inst.ks is equal to hd colon label, and of course label is in caps. Make sure you are following case sensitivity, equals, and we're going to copy this entire name that we see here for the label because we want it to match. So it's going to be RHEL 810 base OS x86 underscore 64. And remember, you want to get the right name because that is the label of the RHEL ISO. So let's go ahead and paste that here. Now, if you notice, my copy and paste added some extra spaces because the 4 goes on to the next line. That is going to cause us some problems, so we want to make sure we delete all those spaces, and we have 6-4 together. So if you experience that problem, make sure you have that typed correctly. All right, so with that out of the way, let's do a :/ks.cfg. And then that should be your entire command there. All right, so we're all set with that. Now let's go back to our other terminal in which we did a grep in order to find a specific string that we were looking for, because we're gonna have to do another grep, and I'll walk you through that process. So here was that original terminal where we did our initial grep and we were looking for that label Linux. So here is the next grep that you're gonna have to do. So as you see, the command is grep-m1-a3. And this time we're looking for install Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And we're going to grep under the /temp/RHEL 810 directory, that temporary directory that we created, EFI/boot/grub.config. Now the purpose of this is to make sure that we note the first boot entry when we are booting in UEFI. All right, so let's hit enter on this. And this output is important to note. Now, of course, we're going to copy this and we're going to paste it in our boot.cfg because of course we're gonna have to make some changes there. So follow me on this one. So let's go ahead and copy. Let's head back to our other terminal so we can make changes. So now that we're back at our other terminal, we can actually write our changes and quit out of this file because we actually no longer need it. So let's do : write quit, an exclamation, meaning I'm gonna force it to, because if you remember in the beginning, it did say this was a read-only file, so I am going to force it in this case. Now let's go ahead and do vi/temp/RHEL 810 directory. Now let's go into the EFI directory /boot/grub.config. So as you can see that this grub file is also a read-only file, and because we are root, we're just gonna force the write. Now keep in mind, in order to make this video a little bit shorter and not have to go through changing permissions, I'm doing it in this manner, but ideally you wanna make sure you have the right write permissions in order to adjust these files. So let's go ahead and set number, so that way you can see what line number I'm on. And here is the beginning of our first boot entry. So let's go ahead and add a line above here. Now remember, we copied our output from our previous grep, so this is where we can paste it. So let's do edit, paste. Now here I am back at the output of that grep. Now I actually forgot something, and it's very, very important. You want to make sure that you copy the whole entire thing. Now that includes this little bracket that I missed out of that copy and paste. So let's redo that again. So let's copy, including that closing bracket. So copy. Now let's head back to our grub file. Now let's undo again. Now let's go ahead and add that other line in there. And now this time, let's go ahead and edit and paste. And now you can actually see that I did copy in everything correctly, including that little bracket that I missed before. So it's very, very important that you have this set exactly, or else you'll have problems. Now let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger so that way it doesn't wrap around. So let's go ahead and make some adjustments here so that way we can adjust the grub file. So that way when we boot in UEFI mode, it knows how to find the right label. Now again, the big thing that we're gonna change here is we go to the end of where it says quiet here, and we wanna point it to that Kickstart file. And remember, it's important that you name that Kickstart file KS because this is exactly where we're actually calling it out. Not only here in this grub file, but also in the previous file that we adjusted. So let's go ahead and add here inst.ks equals HD : all caps label. And here we can copy RHEL 810 and we go up to where it says 64. So now that we copied that, let's go ahead and do equals. And here we can paste. Now notice that I didn't get all those extra spaces like I did before. So it's very helpful when you have enough space to work with and you're able to copy and paste. Now let's do a :/ks.cfg. Now before we go ahead and finally close and save our grub file, let's go ahead and make sure that where it says install, we go ahead and type in Kickstart. And again, when we go ahead and boot off the USB, we want to make sure that we see Kickstart install Red Hat Enterprise Linux 810. So let's close out of this, right quit, an exclamation point because again, we want to force the write because as you saw, it's a read-only file. Now we have to go inside of the temporary directory where we have our RHEL 810 and of course where we made all the adjustments. And now we're going to package up these adjustments. So let's go ahead and cd into temp RHEL 810. Now let's do an LSLA here. Now before we go ahead and package all this up, if you look at the commands that we've done prior up to this point, we went ahead and we adjusted the ISO linux.config file that is inside of this temporary RHEL 810 directory that we've been adjusting. Same thing with the grub file. But the other thing, and it was the third thing, well, one of the three things that I told you was we had to go ahead and make sure that our custom Kickstarter file is in here. And I never told you guys to copy it. So at this point, we can go ahead and copy. And I had that custom config file saved in /home/Louis Acosta ks.cfg. And remember, you have to name it ks.cfg because that's what we named it in both the grub file and the ISO Linux file. So because we are inside of the RHEL 810 directory, we can just do // meaning save it here or copy it here. So now let's redo an ls-la. And you can go ahead and see that the ks.cfg file is in this RHEL 810 directory. And now at this point, we can go ahead and package up our RHEL 810 directory so that way we can write that to a USB. All right, so here is the really long command. And again, for your convenience, I will go ahead and put it in the description. But the big thing to note here, and there's two things that I want to point out is first, what do you want to name your ISO? And in my case, I created a RHEL 8-10 period ISO. So that is going to be the name of my ISO. You can name that accordingly. And as you see here, it's under the /temp directory. So that is where it's going to be dumped. And then the other thing that I want to point out, and specifically I won't go too much into detail with the rest of the command, is towards the end. And towards the end here is the name of the label. The label has to match. So as you see here, I have RHEL -8-10-0, so on and so forth. If you remember when we did the grep and we had this label over here, especially when we were adjusting the ISO Linux config file, and even the same thing when it came to the grub.config file, the labels, they all have to match. So if they don't match, you're gonna have big problems when it comes to booting off the USB. So if we go back to the long command here, you can see here that the label that I have, RHEL 8-10-0, so on and so forth, that matches exactly. And of course, I use copy and paste in order to make sure I didn't fat finger anything. And one last bonus, don't forget the period at the end, because if you forget the period, that is also going to cause you trouble. So let's go ahead and run this command in order now to package up this RHEL 810 directory that we've adjusted with not only our custom Kickstarter file, but also as well, we've adjusted our ISO Linux config and also as well the grub config file. So let's hit enter on this. And of course, we'll give it a couple of minutes to finish. Now that we're done creating our RHEL ISO, and remember, we took all the changes that we did in that temporary directory and we created our own RHEL 810 ISO. And we can find that in the temp directory, especially within that command. So if I were to do an ls and we were to go into the temp directory and we were to look for RHEL 810, you can see here that there is the ISO that I created. So at this point now that we have our ISO, the last thing to do is just to write that ISO to our USB drive. So go ahead and plug in your USB drive in the computer if you haven't done so yet. And let's head over to activities and we go to show applications and let's launch our Fedora Media Writer. So you can see it under frequent because I used it before, or if you go under all, you can see it there as well. So let's launch Fedora Media Writer. And you can see here that it actually sees my USB drive that I plugged into the computer, which is our SanDisk. And let's go ahead and let's select our ISO file and let's hit next. And we want to make sure that our SanDisk is actually selected and that is the right USB. And I'm telling you guys, you don't want to overwrite a USB where you have data on there that is very important. So make sure you don't make that mistake. So let's go ahead and select our ISO file that we just created. So under select, let's click that. And remember, I created it under the /temp directory. So don't get confused with the RHEL ISO DVD that we downloaded earlier. So keep in mind, let's do other location. Let's go to computer. Let's go to the temp directory. And there it is. There is the RHEL 8-10 ISO that I created. So let's select that. And all we do at this point is hit write. Now it's telling us here, hey, are you sure that you want to overwrite the data that is on this USB? And of course I am sure, so let's go ahead and hit write. Now it's asking for authentication, so let's go ahead and put our authentication password. Now at this point, the tool will automatically resize the USB to a smaller capacity, and once it resizes it, it will automatically go ahead and burn that ISO file that we created. So at this point, all you have to do is sit back, relax, and give this a couple of minutes in order to finish. All right, guys, and just like that, we've completed writing our RHEL 8-10 ISO to our USB. So at this point, you can go ahead and power down your machine, and you can go ahead and boot off of that USB drive in order to install RHEL. Now keep in mind, we added that extra boot entry, and you saw on there where it says Kickstart install. So when you go ahead and boot off the USB, make sure you click the Kickstart install, and you will see it will actually go ahead and install RHEL 8-10 on your laptop automatically.
So welcome back, everyone. By now, you all should be experts in creating your own custom USB, and especially in order to be able to deploy RHEL. So now you know how to automatically deploy RHEL, and for my system admins out there, don't go play video games or hanging out because I taught you a shortcut. You still want to get the job done, right? Still, or at least make it look like you're doing some work, right? So as you guys noticed, the video is already long enough, so I'll keep the outro short and sweet. But as always, guys, I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you for learning with me. Go ahead and give me a like, as it helps the channel grow, and especially with all the hard work that we put into our videos to teach you all about topics around engineering, tech, and finances. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on, so that way you're notified whenever I upload new videos to the channel. And lastly, of course, make sure you share this with a family member or friend. So I'm gonna head out, guys. It's a beautiful day today. We got some work to do around the house, but more importantly, stay tuned to the channel. There's a lot of great additional content coming your way, and I'll see everybody in the next one.